Imagine a world where the silicon heartbeat of civilization suddenly stops. This is not a simple power outage, but a fundamental shift in the cosmic order of human existence, a real-world Butlerian Jihad. In Frank Herbert's Dune, humanity fought a crusade against thinking machines, ultimately decreeing that no machine shall be made in the likeness of a human mind. If we were to face such a mandate today, the immediate impact would be a deafening silence. The invisible algorithms that manage our electricity, filter our information, and predict our desires would evaporate instantly. We are currently standing at the precipice of total AI integration, where every facet of our life is governed by a digital shadow. To remove it would be like pulling the nervous system out of a living organism. We would be forced to confront the raw, unfiltered reality of our own limitations. This documentary explores the terrifying transition from a world of automated convenience to a future defined by the sheer, unaugmented power of the human spirit and intellect. We begin at the moment of the Great Prohibition, looking at how the structures of the 21st century would buckle and break under the weight of a world forced to think for itself once again.
The first 72 hours without artificial intelligence would be characterized by a systemic collapse of complexity. Modern power grids are not just wires and transformers, they are hyper-complex balancing acts maintained by AI that predicts load demands in milliseconds. Without these thinking regulators, the grid would suffer catastrophic surges and failures, plunging entire continents into a pre-industrial darkness. Logistics would grind to a halt. Our global supply chain, a delicate web of just-in-time deliveries orchestrated by predictive software, would snap. Cargo ships would sit idle at sea, their automated docking systems offline, while trucks carrying perishable food would stall as GPS and route optimization software vanish. In cities, the digital infrastructure that controls water purification, traffic flow, and emergency responses would go dark. This is the immediate cost of the jihad, the loss of the invisible hands that keep 7 billion people fed and sheltered. The dependency we have built is so deep that the withdrawal symptoms would be lethal for millions. We would see the true fragility of a civilization built on the backs of machines that we no longer fully understand, forcing a brutal return to local, manual, and physical systems of survival.
As the dust settles on the ruins of the digital age, a new necessity emerges: the cultivation of the human mind as a replacement for the computer. In the Dune universe, these individuals are known as Mentats, human computers trained from birth to possess supreme logical and analytical capabilities. In a world without AI, our educational systems would undergo a radical transformation. We would abandon the memorization of facts in favor of the mastery of cognitive processes. Schools would become training grounds for mnemonic techniques, advanced mathematics, and rapid-fire logical deduction. The human brain, currently softened by the crutch of Google and ChatGPT, would be forced to expand. We would rediscover the art of memory used by ancient scholars to store entire libraries within their minds. This era would witness the birth of a new intellectual elite, individuals whose value is determined by their internal processing speed and data retention. However, this shift also creates a deep social divide. Without the democratizing power of AI tools, high-level cognition becomes a rare and expensive commodity. Knowledge is no longer a search query away, it is a lifelong discipline, accessible only to those with the time and resources to undergo the grueling mental conditioning required to replace the lost machines.
With the prohibition of the thinking machine, the tools of our ancestors would see a grand resurgence. The slide rule, the abacus, and the mechanical calculator would become the high-tech instruments of a new age. Architectural marvels would no longer be designed by generative algorithms, but by the steady hands of master builders using geometry and intuition. This return to the physical would slow the pace of progress to a crawl, but it would also imbue our creations with a renewed sense of human intentionality. Every bridge, every building, and every tool would be a testament to human calculation rather than a product of an automated optimization loop. We would see the end of planned obsolescence as manufacturing shifts from mass-produced plastic waste to handcrafted durable goods. The economy would transition from the speed of light to the speed of the hand. While this sounds like a regression, it would lead to a profound reconnection with the material world. We would understand how our world is built, piece by piece, because we would be the ones doing the building. The magic of technology would be replaced by the craft of the artisan, creating a society that values quality, longevity, and the unmistakable touch of the human creator in every object.
Space exploration, the final frontier, would become infinitely more dangerous and exclusive without AI. In our current reality, interstellar travel is a dream powered by supercomputers calculating trajectories and fuel burns. Without them, we face the challenge of the Guild navigators. We would need to develop human-centric methods of navigating the void. This might involve the use of specialized drugs to enhance perception, or the development of massive analog observational stations. The vast distances between planets would no longer be bridged by automated drones, but by crews of hyper-specialized humans who must maintain their own life support systems through manual vigilance. The loss of AI-driven robotics would mean that asteroid mining and planetary colonization would require thousands of human workers instead of a few remote-controlled machines. This expansion would be slow, bloody, and incredibly expensive. It would likely lead to a feudal structure in space, where powerful houses or corporations control the limited routes between worlds. The stars would no longer be a playground for scientific curiosity, but a theater for human ambition and grit, where every light second traveled is a victory of human willpower over the cold, unfeeling vacuum of the universe. In the realm of medicine, the absence of AI would lead us away from genomic sequencing and robotic surgery toward a deeper mastery of biological systems. Without the ability to simulate drug interactions or model protein folding on a computer, we would rely on the Bene Gesserit approach, the total control of the human body through mental discipline and biochemistry. Medicine would become more holistic and observational. Surgeons would develop a level of tactile sensitivity and manual precision that surpasses anything seen in the modern era, as they can no longer rely on haptic feedback from robotic arms. We might see the rise of living technology, using genetically modified organisms to perform tasks that were once handled by silicon chips. Bioengineering would take a strange, organic turn. Instead of neural implants, we might use sensory-enhancing chemistry. The focus would shift from fixing the body with external machines to perfecting the body from within. This path, however, carries the risk of creating a biological caste system, where the wealthy can afford the treatments that enhance their lifespan and cognitive functions, while the rest of the world relies on traditional, often primitive medical practices in a post-digital landscape. The global village would collapse, replaced by a world of whispers and physical scrolls. Without AI to manage the internet's routing protocols, global communication would revert to the speed of physical travel. The instant connectivity that defines the 21st century would be remembered as a brief, chaotic dream. In its place, we would see the return of the courier and the diplomat. Information would become the most precious commodity, and its security would be maintained not by encryption, but by the loyalty of the person carrying the message. This would lead to a radical decentralization of power. Local cultures would begin to diverge once again, no longer homogenized by the same viral trends and algorithmic feeds. News would travel slowly, often filtered through the biases of those who transmit it. This lack of instant information would make large-scale governance nearly impossible, likely leading to the rise of city-states and regional empires. Diplomacy would once again become a high-stakes art form, requiring face-to-face negotiations and long-term trust. The world would feel vast and mysterious again, a place where a journey to another continent is a life-altering event, rather than a routine flight.
The global economy would undergo a violent definancialization. High-frequency trading, which relies on AI to execute millions of trades in a fraction of a second, would vanish overnight. The stock market, as we know it, would cease to exist. We would return to a commodity-based economy, where physical assets, gold, water, oil, and spices, hold the only real value.
Currency would have to be backed by something tangible, as the digital ledgers that support fiat currency would be too vulnerable to human error and corruption without algorithmic oversight. Banking would become a slow, bureaucratic process involving mountains of paperwork and physical vaults. This would end the era of hyper-capitalism and easy credit. Investment would become a long-term commitment based on personal relationships and the physical inspection of assets. While this would drastically reduce the speed of economic growth, it might also eliminate the boom and bust cycles driven by algorithmic speculation. We would move toward a more stable, albeit slower, economic system, where the value of a man's word and the quality of his grain are more important than a digital credit score or a speculative bubble in a virtual marketplace.
Warfare in a post-AI world would look strikingly like the combat of the Middle Ages, but with the remnants of high technology. Without smart bombs, autonomous drones, or satellite-guided missiles, the battlefield returns to the human element. Strategy would be dictated by generals who must rely on their own intuition and the reports of scouts. We would see the return of the warrior elite, highly trained individuals whose physical prowess and tactical brilliance cannot be replicated by a machine. In Dune, the invention of personal shields made firearms obsolete, leading to a return to blade combat. In our scenario, the unreliability of complex electronic targeting systems might lead to a similar outcome. Warfare would become more personal, more brutal, and arguably more human. The psychological toll of combat would return to the forefront, as the distance provided by remote-operated machines is removed. Battles would be won through discipline, morale, and the clever use of the environment. The focus of military research would shift from making smarter machines to making more resilient and lethal human beings, perhaps through advanced training or chemical enhancement, turning the soldier into the ultimate weapon of the state.
Political structures would inevitably shift toward neo-feudalism. In a world where information is slow and technology is difficult to maintain, power naturally concentrates in the hands of those who control essential resources. We would see the rise of great houses, corporations or families that manage the extraction of minerals, the purification of water, or the maintenance of the few remaining high-tech transport systems. The democratic ideals of the digital age, which relied on the rapid dissemination of information and mass participation, would struggle to survive. Instead, loyalty and vassalage would become the primary social bonds. Leaders would provide protection and resources in exchange for service and fealty. This structure mirrors the Imperium of Dune, where a centralized authority struggles to maintain control over distant, semi-autonomous fiefdoms. Social mobility would decrease as the skills required to navigate this new world, be it Mentat-level calculation or master craftsmanship, would be passed down through guilds and families. The world would become a tapestry of small, highly organized communities, each governed by a rigid hierarchy designed to ensure survival in a world where a single mistake in calculation could lead to total disaster. Energy management would become an artisanal endeavor. Without AI to optimize the flow of electrons, we would move away from giant, interconnected grids toward local, manageable power sources. Small-scale nuclear, hydroelectric, and solar installations would be maintained by hand, with engineers reading analog dials and manually adjusting valves. This would make energy expensive and precious. We would no longer live in a world of always-on lights and climate-controlled environments. Instead, our lives would be dictated by the availability of power. Factories might only run during the day. Cities might go dark at midnight to conserve energy. This scarcity would drive a new kind of efficiency, not the efficiency of the algorithm, but the efficiency of the user. We would learn to live with the rhythms of the natural world again, using architecture to cool our homes and natural light to guide our work. The mastery of energy would be the hallmark of a successful community, and those who can maintain a stable power source without the help of a computer would be the true masters of the post-AI era, holding the power of life and death over their neighbors.
The death of digital storage would force us to rethink the concept of history and memory. Everything we have stored on the cloud, our photos, our records, our collective knowledge, is incredibly fragile. Without AI to manage the databases and the hardware to read the bits, our digital heritage would vanish in a generation. We would return to the age of the scribe. Important knowledge would be carved into stone, etched into metal, or written on high-quality parchment. Libraries would once again become the most sacred spaces in civilization, protected by orders of scholars who dedicate their lives to the preservation of human thought. Oral traditions would regain their importance, as stories and lessons are passed from teacher to student through rhyme and song to ensure they are not forgotten. This would lead to a more curated history. We would lose the trivial data of the 21st century, the billions of selfies and social media posts, and be forced to decide what is truly worth remembering. Our history would become a collection of myths and essential truths, stripped of the noise of the information age and focused on the enduring lessons of the human experience.
The psychological impact of a world without AI would be perhaps the most profound change of all. The attention economy, which uses AI to exploit our dopamine loops, would be dismantled. The constant barrage of notifications and the endless scroll of curated content would disappear, leaving a vast, quiet space in the human mind. Initially, this would lead to a period of intense withdrawal and anxiety for a population addicted to instant gratification. However, over time, we would see the return of deep focus and contemplative thought. Without a machine to provide the correct answer, individuals would be forced to develop their own judgment and intuition. We would become more present in our physical surroundings and more connected to the people around us. The loneliness of the digital age, paradoxical as it was, would be replaced by a more demanding but fulfilling social reality. We would rediscover the value of boredom as the fertile soil for creativity. The human psyche, no longer outsourced to an algorithm, would have to find its own equilibrium, leading to a more grounded, resilient, and perhaps more authentic way of being in the world.
The quest for scientific discovery would continue, but it would change its nature. Big data would be replaced by big observation. Without the ability to run massive simulations, scientists would return to long-term observational studies and physical experiments. We might not discover new particles every year, but our understanding of the ones we know would be deeper and more intuitive. Chemistry would return to its roots in alchemy and material science, focusing on what can be touched and transformed in a laboratory. The pace of innovation would slow, but the breakthroughs would be more significant because they would represent a fundamental leap in human understanding rather than an algorithmic pattern discovery. Every scientific advancement would be a hard-won battle of the human mind against the mysteries of the universe. This would foster a culture of profound respect for the master scientists, individuals who have spent decades honing their mental faculties to perceive the hidden laws of nature. Science would once again become a vocation of passion and endurance, a slow climb toward the light of truth rather than a fast-paced race for patents and technological dominance. In the end, a world without AI, a world that has undergone its own Butlerian Jihad, is not a world that has failed, but a world that has chosen a different path. It is a world that has traded the cold efficiency of the machine for the warm, messy, and infinite potential of the human spirit. Like the universe of Dune, it is a place of great danger and great inequality, but it is also a place where a single person's mind can change the course of history. We would lose the comfort of being taken care of by our creations, but we would regain the sovereignty of our own souls. We would be forced to grow, to adapt, and to become something more than just the users of technology. We would become the architects of our own evolution. This hypothetical journey reminds us that while AI is a powerful tool, it is not our destiny. Our destiny lies in the expansion of our own consciousness, the strengthening of our own bodies, and the deepening of our own connections. Whether we ever face a real-world ban on thinking machines or not, the lesson remains. The greatest machine ever created is the one currently listening to these words, the human mind, and its potential, even without silicon, is truly limitless.